Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the FC Transfer Room. You're with Dan, and Colin this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Give us a like, give us a comment, give us a subscribe. That's really, really important for us. We really appreciate you being with us this evening. Get yourself in the chat, get your comments in. This conversation goes so much better when you're involved, and that's what the channel is for. It's for people to be involved, to have their voice, to answer their questions, to get our opinions, and we'll get round to it, and it's part of the conversation. Then we'll get it up on stream. So, boys, we'll get straight into it. Dan, 1 week, almost to the hour since Jurgen Klopp's last left the Anfield pitch. How do you feel?
It's empty. Is it? Not in an existential sense. It's just like it's weird because I think me and Colin have probably mentioned this before in streams in the past. Jurgen Klopp was there for 9 years, which was for me I was still in undergrad in college. I went through grad school, got married, moved to Boston. So like your whole life from your 20s to your 30s has been nothing but Jurgen Klopp. So it's just like a part of that's gone now. So it's just like, it's just different. It's weird. It's like empty. A big part of your life is just now gone. But now he's on Instagram and he's an Instagram baddie. And you know what? I'm happy for that because Klopp's actually not leaving my life. I get to see him on Instagram now, taking funny photos. And you know what? I'm all here for it. And I just want the bald fella in now. And I was actually looking if they had he's been announced, but he's not technically accepted. He's not in the role yet, Arne Slot, because it's still subject to a work permit. But I just want the bald fella in now. I want the new stepdad.
This is it. We want our cool new stepdad, and he's going to bring us some new toys. That's what we're all interested in, aren't we? Colin, are you also feeling equally as empty and full of despair 1 week after Jurgen Klopp left Anfield?
Yeah, I said this yesterday when I was on, but it feels like so much longer ago already. It feels like we've been without them for like longer than it actually has been. And I I'm very ready for this to all begin. Mentioned as well, like literally the highlight of my summer is Liverpool coming to Pittsburgh. Like that is my Super Bowl. I did not ever think that Liverpool, this all-time historic franchise that I absolutely adore. I never thought they'd come to Pittsburgh. Like, we've hardly hosted major games like that in the summer. Like anyways, it's been like almost 10 years. And so I'm absolutely could not be more excited that they are coming and to get that started. I was Dan, you said the bald fella. I was explaining I have a sister. I have a sister who's much younger than me. She's 15 years younger than me, and I was explaining to her that that Jurgen was going, and she was sad about that. And then she said, "Well, who's going to be the new coach?" And I was like, "Well, his name's Arne Slot, and he's very bald." And she was like how bald? And I was like, like his head shines in the sun, like it has a reflection bald. And
no, he's a true baldy. He's a true one.
He's a real bald one.
He's embraced it, hasn't he? He's not fighting it. He's going straight into it. So we're going all off.
And it looks like he's been that way for quite a long time. Which is like that's some real like personal conviction to like embrace that at such a young age. But more the power to him, and I think that probably speaks to his character. No, but yeah, I'm very excited to get the summer on with and to see, like you said, what shiny new toys we get.
He's got great character, great technician.
Oh no, you're giving me reminders of being Liverpool, aka being shit on Channel 5 as it was at the time, and having to watch the awkwardness of Brendan Rodgers and Raheem Sterling's exchange. I'm wondering who thought this is a good idea. This is okay. We're going to put this out to the world to see. Let's get this on telly because this will look great.
You said steady.
Sterling.
Steady.
He'll be on the first play at home. Yeah, he's not Scottish. He's Northern Irish, and I'll move on before I offend anybody else. Right, okie dokie. Appreciate everyone who's watching. Numbers are steadily rising there, up into the 700s. Keep on going, guys. Get yourself involved in the chat for us. Anyone who's watching over on Twitter, come over to YouTube and put in the comments and the live chat. Get involved in there, and we'll try and get involved in the conversation. So, talking of potential new toys, of what one of them we could be losing, which is the reports coming out of Spain, which have been kind of creeping in the last couple of weeks from Diaz and AS, reporting that Deco, the sporting director of Barcelona, has met with Luis Diaz's representatives, aka his dad, to discuss the possibilities of a move, which I don't think Luis Diaz would be very much against moving. And really, the biggest question I'm going to pose out there, and I'll start with Colin. We know that Barcelona are very interested in Luis Diaz. Do we think they actually have the money to buy him, though?
So this has several layers to me. I'm sure that they are interested in him. He screams a Barcelona player, I think, in just in terms of profile, like ridiculously skillful, that really stretch the field sort of player. And I'm sure, that there's no one higher on his all-time list probably than Barcelona. That's how the South Americans are. I would expect nonetheless. I hate when people are represented by their family members. I hate it.
The boys on it, yeah.
It drives me nuts. And I try to be sensitive for, all of the like genuine hardship that his family has gone through in the past, like a horrific situation. But I like and any time that a player, and this goes across all sports, this happens in the NFL all the time. When someone's represented by someone who is their family member, the amount of times that it goes wrong is so much higher than when you're being represented. I'm not saying that everybody needs to have, a major, huge label, someone who you don't speak to represent them. I get it, but you get stories like this all the time. And he's been speaking about his interest in wanting his son to go to Barcelona for now, honestly, since he's been released, like since he's been been free again. Like he's been talking about wanting him to go to Barcelona. So, and I just don't think Barcelona have the funds available to do that, and certainly not to pay all up front. Maybe they could work something out. Maybe Liverpool are willing to or interested in working out a payment structure with Barcelona. They've done it in the past with the Coutinho move, but I don't see this as something that they can actually afford or do. I'm willing to listen to to reasons that anybody might think that they can, but I don't see that as something that's feasible for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you say there. It's a very common situation to be represented by family members, and there has been a few quite. Yeah, I mean, some of them work excellently. Yeah. Kylian Mbappe's, by his own mum, and ultimately she seems to be absolutely incredible at doing that job, which is incredibly. I suppose it was sort of political, really, isn't it? Because you've got to kind of try and find ways to make your moves at the right times, and when to stop, when to stick, when to apply pressure, when to speak to the right kind of people. And ultimately, there's no real training course to this. There's no real world where you can go and learn this in school. It's either something which you're capable of going and doing, or something that you're not. And then, as you say, we've got prime examples of them. One of them being Harry Kane. He's represented by Charlie Kane, and he signed. It was the last deal before he obviously got his move over to Bayern. Which, to be honest with you, looking back on it, it really wasn't a good sort of deal for Harry Kane at the time. It kind of left him out of the opportunity to be moving to a club like Man City, who I think would have gone for him had his old deal still been in place. So it can definitely come back and bite people in the backside. But the biggest issue I think I have with it is when it's the over talking and the non-professional side of it. Like a professional agent doesn't find himself in the media being with a microphone underneath the nose saying, does Luis Diaz support Barcelona? It just doesn't happen. They don't get themselves in those situations where Luis Diaz's dad has been well documented having a very, very good time following his son round with the Liverpool team, and he's out there and the fans, and he's out there in a good time, and as he should be. But that does lead to situations like this, which for a club like Liverpool, it doesn't quite help us because you don't want to be hearing about your own players interested in moving to other clubs. Dan, your opinions on Luis Diaz and a move to Barcelona? Last time we did real business with them was obviously Coutinho. That bit them in the backside. They have a little bit of an issue, Barcelona, when it comes to paying their bills. And I say this is because the Rafinha deal, who apparently is meant to be making way to make room for Luis Diaz, still hasn't fully been paid yet. So would you be concerned that if we did do a deal that Liverpool wouldn't financially fully benefit from the sale of him?
Well, I mean, if Barcelona don't like fulfill the financial obligations, they're going to court on top of like all their other issues in the past, like with everything else. For me, it's just like there's always South American players are always going to link for Barcelona, and a lot of what's being said is Luis Diaz's dad, who's in England and having the time of his life after being kidnapped by a cartel and being released, and then essentially moving entire countries to England, and essentially has been living his best life, which we stand. And he's being asked by his paper. It's like, oh, what do you think about this? It's like, well, it's always our dream to play for Barcelona. Like, I don't know how serious to take it because a lot of this is just like, oh yeah, it would be nice. Like if someone said, oh, how would it feel? Would you play for Barcelona? It's like, oh, of course I would love. It's always my dream to play for Barcelona, X, Y, Z. And, I feel like that the rumor mill is very like, this is something that's always been perpetrated. I don't think Barcelona could afford him and register him unless they sold Rafinha, Frankie de Jong, or some Koundé, somebody that they could get his return off of. They would have to also have issues registering him. That's interesting. James mentioned that up. I just think it's just the fact they're just trying to negotiate a new deal. Diaz just wants to get his new deal in, probably to be somewhere with his wages in line with where most of the squad is right now, which is 90, 80, 100K now. Like the average player right now, like Szoboszlai, Gravenberch, McAllister, now that Thiago's left, now that the other players have left, I think this is just more that Diaz is himself trying to negotiate or posturing, this kind of agent posturing to get him a new deal, essentially, and reward and protect his value, which, Hughes and Edwards have done in the past. Like they're not, someone comes in and they say, it's like, oh, we want more money. It's like they've always been willing to give players more money and not to be like, oh, you're unhappy, we're going to sell you right away. I know Paul's mentioned that they're selling Rafinha. I don't know who's buying Rafinha is the problem. Like that's so good that they want to sell Rafinha. Half the chat at times wants to sell. Yeah, exactly. Half the chat at times wants to sell Gakpo. Exactly. So who's going to pay what Barcelona want for what they paid Rafinha for from Leeds, which I think was like 40 or 50, which wasn't a lot, but still, like you're paying. It's still money that Barcelona essentially have sold their financial stability as a club to register players like Lewandowski, like Koundé, like Clement Longway, which they've even loaned out. Ansu Fati, I don't think they could even register this year. So he was at Brighton Hove Albion, and that loan move capitulated. So they have, and they've essentially been running their 18, 19-year-old players into the ground, like Gavi, Pedri, who are on ridiculously high wages and are essentially, it's child labor now, apparently, in Barcelona. Like, let's just break these teenagers in because we're paying them $300,000 a week. I honestly don't know if Diaz would even want to go to Barcelona. They look like a mess. I think for him, he would want to go only if he's not getting a deal at Liverpool or Slot comes and says, you're not in my plans, you're not going to play. And then he might be like, okay, I would like to go to like insert other club. But he could also get a approach from PSG because PSG need to rebuild their team because Mbappe is going to go. Neymar went. And they're trying to rebuild their team. There's not a lot of teams with a lot of money yet right now. I mean, Bayern, like they need a DM, they have issues. And Barcelona, I just forgot they're bringing in Hansi Flick. I completely forgot that they just did that. Where they are, if Xavi doesn't come back, they're going to hire Hansi Flick, and that's a whole situation too. So you don't even know who the manager of Barcelona is going to be, in like 2 months, 3 months, maybe even by September, because Xavi may stay and then leave, and then Hansi Flick still comes in. So for me, it just reeks of like, one, his dad just like having fun and talking. It's being mostly constrained by the papers and the media. And I think he's also just trying to they're just trying to negotiate a better contract, which is understandable. Diaz has been playing very, very well and has been one of the lower payer members of the squad. So, I would put my hands up and say, wait a minute, I was the most consistent player for 4 or 5 months. Where's my improved pay grade over like I mentioned, like Szoboszlai or even Darwin Nunez or even Salah this year? Like, I can put my hand up and say that I've put in the shift in the work. So I think that's what it is. I've always said this, and people attack me because I'm right. I don't think we're selling a forward this summer, and the only time we're going to buy a forward, like a Bakayoko or somebody else, is if, one, we're anticipating someone to be sold next summer or in January, or two, we're not buying a DM or a center back. And that's my opinion.
And it's a good one, and you've sort of touched on where I'm convinced that we have to sign somebody this season on the right hand side. That we can't be losing Salah next year, whether it's for sale, which is my ideal one, that he signs a 1-year extension, and then that means that he then can go on a fee next season. Everyone's value is protected. He gets his wages, blah, 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 blah. And if Saudi do come in, the last thing I want is for any of our players to be leaving the club for free. It's just not the way that it should be. It's the only time any player ever walks out the door on a free is a situation where they're not on very high wages, and ultimately their job is to sit on the bench. First team players who are still first team quality, when they leave the club, should be attracting a fee. So I'm convinced that a right winger is something that we should be investing in. I'm absolutely not against the idea of selling a left-sided attacking player that we have, because Diaz is 27, and Diogo Jota is also getting on within the later stages of his 20s and perhaps his Liverpool career. What we're then going to end up with is, and this is where the potential is, if we don't sell someone on the left-hand side this season, there's a good chance that we could lose 2 next year. The chances of losing 2 next year is much higher, because we'll then have 2 players who eventually will have a higher age ceiling, and B, if we don't offer them a new deal, like for example, like you say about Luis Diaz, he's on £56,000 a week, which in today's money is not an awful lot of money. And the only thing I'll counter to that is he signed the deal. He accepted the money. That's what he was happy with, and it was a pay increase on what he was being paid at Porto, and that sometimes is the way the cookie crumbles. So I'm not quite sure whether or not he'll be offered a new deal, though. I'm not so sure. He has had another one, surely, since he joined.
I don't think he has. Like,
Did
so
they not
this
give
is
him
no, I don't think he has. So
Right.
I think this is gonna be a situation where we had this a couple years ago, where they're going to have to decide who are they going to keep, who they're going to sell. So do you give Diaz a new deal or Jota a new deal? They might give both of them a new deal and then sell one the next year and then sell one the year after that. But they're not going to sell anyone. The reason I don't think they're going to sell anyone is that if you look at the forwards we've actually sold, so Benteke we sold a year. I think it was a year on loan at Prowse, and then we sold him. But he was brought out very quickly. Monty didn't leave until he was 30. I think it was 30, 29, 30, 31 when he went to Bayern. So he was
30 going on 31, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like it's very much like into the career. You saw like he was great as a striker, but you can tell his pace has gone left wing. That's why they bought Diaz. I don't think Diaz is Jota going to be sold except in like a next year, next 2 or 3 years. So there's still this idea of like, how do we get, I keep talking about principles, but Hughes and Edwards very much buy into the idea of like, this is how we evaluate this player per season. They're 10 million a year or 5 million a year or whatever. What are we getting in that return? Goals, assists, pressures, however you want to whatever their KPIs are, their underlying metrics. They're not going to be sold except, like I said, in a year or 2 years, because the thing is, if you're selling some of them now, you're just creating more problems. And this is why, we always have these discussions like, we should sell 3 players and buy Refo, Leah. Like, why would you do that much work for one player?
Right.
Exactly. So, exactly. So, why are we going to spend 100 million on Kvaratskhelia from, Napoli?
Well said, like that.
I'm working my Georgian.
I love the bravery. I love it.
So, but why would you create that situation work? It doesn't make any sense. So if anything, they're both going to be looking for new contracts. Van Dijk, someone we mentioned, Salah, again, 2-year extensions with those as well. And we already know that Edwards and Hughes don't really want to give older players contracts. So It could be either more performance based. I don't know if they probably won't take a lesser salary. So it's more the fact that, but we are also in a position where we can maintain higher salary players who are older, especially your Van Dijks and your Salahs, who are obviously very good. And Allison is probably going to be top drawer to like he's 37, 38. So, where do you want to create yourself more work? Unless Diaz specifically says, I want to go to Barcelona, make this still happen. It's not going to happen. And Jota, I think, is perfectly fine staying at Liverpool until he goes back to Benfica, Porto, Lisbon, somewhere, maybe in Spain or Madrid. Like,
you're too much of a romantic, Dan. That's your problem. You're so romantic about the returns and just come back and it's all glory for yeah. For me, it's difficult, isn't it? Because we've got a new manager, so we don't really know what we're going to be playing like next season. We don't know exactly if we're going to be playing a 4-2-3-1 or we're going to play a 4-3-3, and that's going to be on the manager. Slot's going to have to work out what it is he's going to do with the new tools that he has within his team. And I suppose the last thing he probably would want was to have any of those players leave before he's even had an opportunity to see how they work with what he wants to do. But with the Euros coming in, that adds a whole new level of sort of question marks. Is the club would probably like to get jobs done before that tournament begins and the Copa America begins, as within the time that they're in those camps, nothing can be done. No deals are going to be signed, and it would leave us later down the line. So yeah, Luis Diaz to Barcelona. I don't think anyone's against the idea of him going. I don't think anyone's out there saying he absolutely has to stay. And I think that's based on his output. I can't fault his performances. I know he's out there working very hard. I know he's doing a lot of very good things, but unfortunately, the numbers that he's put up based on the amount of minutes that he's had in the team, they're just not really good enough, I'm afraid, and that's a shame. So I just think he is one of the players who we could afford to lose. And the real question, just around the room very quickly, Dan, Carl, do we need to replace him specifically if we sell him?
I'll let you go first, Colin.
I really think that if we don't do an attacker anyways this summer, even if Diaz stays, we're going to be in the situation where we definitely need to do two next year, or one in the winter, one in the summer. Then, I think that this kind of comes back to something that we had talked about all last summer, which was, the entire reason we had to do an entire midfield rebuild in one summer was because we felt like, for a long time that we should have been replacing, having those replacements already brought in, right? So, to me, we're kind of bordering on the same mistake again, which is if we don't bring one in now, we're definitely going to have to do two later.
Yeah.
Just based on age, profile, wage, Diaz, to his point, will want a bigger contract at some point from someone. He's got one more contract, so he's going to want it to be bigger in that prime range, 28 to 32, 27 to 32. So he's going to want more money. I totally understand that. But to my point, I just think if we don't do one anyways, we definitely will have to do two. So if we're going to sell him, to me, that's a must. If he goes, it has to be one.
So to your point, Colin, the only one I think that you actually really need to think about replacing is Salah. So so this is the situation.
I just mean
Diaz.
Attacking three, or attacking, in the front three. If any of those guys go who were in the front line, we've got to get at least one of them. I definitely agree with you, Dan. To me, that right wing is that's the one. And then we've got other people who can play left. But
yeah. So, okay. So this is where it gets a little bit complicated. So let's start with the manager. So one of the reasons we've read about why Slot's coming in is because he's really good at evaluating youth players and youth talent and kind of figuring out how do we going to maximize, because I think someone said after the Capital One Cup, the League Cup. It was a Capital One Cup.
Carabao.
The Carabao Cup. The Capital One, the Carabao, the EFL Cup, whatever. The Milk Trophy. Cup. Yeah, the Milk Cup, the Coca-Cola Cup.
That's it.
So Slot was brought in and targeted because he plays a similar style to Jurgen, a little bit different, but again, very similar principles, very similar philosophy, different emphasis on different things. He's very good at getting youth players and kind of saying, okay, these are the top ones, these are the bad ones. So he's going to come in and you see a lot of this revamping, and they're trying to figure out like what is the value of our youth setup right now? Because I think James Pierce said they believe there was 200 million in there. Someone mentioned this in the chat, and this one to give a shout out. I think it was it Paul Smith, or maybe it was somebody else had mentioned that all the youth players we have. The reason I don't think they'll buy an attacker yet, unless they sell one, is because they're going to give Slot a summer to say, what is Kate Gordon? Can he make it? Ben Doak, can he make it? Is Dan's going to make it? You know, people in the chat thought Jaden Downs was the reincarnation of Michael Owen. He's not. He's a good player, but let's calm
Next
down.
Harry Kane, I heard.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's like he's next Harry Kane. He's going to start talking like him too. He's going to be like, very good.
I'm not against it. If he wants to be the next Harry Kane, I'm certainly not against it.
I agree. But his job is to come in and kind of assess what is the talent worth, who is going to should be kept on, who should be sold. That's his job, and he's going to be working that with Hughes and Edwards and. Well, not Edwards himself, but Hughes and that whole backroom staff, and then figure out who are the new players coming out as youth players, and who do we need to go and buy? Because as we've probably seen, there hasn't been a lot of transfer business up this past like 6 months because PSR rules, new UEFA rules. There's going to be a lot less spending on money now. And
look at January.
There
was no business for anyone. So, nobody did business.
Exactly. So there's going to be this situation where who can we keep in that is, if not better than if not better than someone on the market, is at least tangible, has a comp. So I don't think we're in danger of the drop off and forward from midfield, like Colin, your fear as well, because we don't have as many players on either 1-year deals, injury prone, or getting old. The only forward that's getting old is Salah, and he looked like he was dropping up into the year, but you might be able to get 6 to 8 months out of him. And 6 to 8 months of good Salah is 18 goals and 10 assists. So even if we sold Diaz, like you can rejig the front line and essentially make, Salah forward, make someone buy a right winger, a Bakayoko if you think he's good enough. If Doak, K Gordon, everybody else is not good as well, and then you can go there from then you can go forward from that position. But I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of business in the summer regardless, and that's why I don't think they'll sell anyone. Dad's like, because. Is that the noise, or is that because?
Hang on. My new stepdad's here. I'm expecting a PlayStation 5, Disneyland. We're doing the. Come on,
I don't think they'll buy more than 2 to 3. I don't think they're going to buy more than 2 to 3 players, and I mean like actually transfers. I'm not talking about frees or loans or anything else. I think it's going to be 2 to 3 players. They're going to come in that are going to be expected to be part of that first team squad. And like who those players are, I have no idea, because I think it might be William Pacheco and somebody else is the thing. It could be a DM. It could be a forward. They're not going to buy a fullback. I hate to bring that to you, but I think people were talking about like buying fullbacks. They're probably going to make the fullbacks Beck, Chambers, or
Calvin Ramsey's there. Bradley. There's a lot of over there. Like, Bradley. It's not overly necessary. And I mean, don't get me wrong, Antoine Robinson, I'm all about it, but Fulham are going to be wanting a pretty penny, at left back, aren't they? So it's like you say, it's perhaps probably not the best idea right now to go out there and say, right, we're going to throw £45 million at him, for example. Where the man who's in charge, and I'm sure the 2,500 people who are watching right now will know, Mike Edwards is back in the driver's seat. And when we say he's in the driver's seat, there's no backseat drivers now. It's just him. He's going to be the person who's going to have all the decisions when it comes to making the purchases he wants. And this is the same man who went out there and sold players like Ryan Brewster, Solanke, Ibe. The list goes on of players who we got really, really good fees for. And he's also gone out there and bought players who showed that the value was there for them. And the data said that these players were absolutely incredible. And somehow you can get a player like Andy Robertson for £8 million. They do exist, but it's about them being the people who are the cleverest in the room, and I think that's what they're going to do. Now, that's a perfect little segue into our second section, a slotter to do, which is 6 days' time. Our new boss, albeit if he gets through customs, of course, and gets his work permit, which I'm sure we'll be okay with. he's going to be in charge. He's going to be starting the job, and there's a lot of work to do. And I want the people in the chat, I want the people who are watching now, come over to YouTube. Anyone who's on there, put your comments in. I want to know, in this first 7 days in the hot seat, the first 7 days in charge, what are his top 3 priorities with this team? What is it that he can't see all of his squad, because a lot of them are going off on holiday, a lot of them are going off onto international duty, for example. What are his priorities? And I want to hear your thoughts about it. And first up, Colin, Arne Slot's priorities in the job. What is it that you feel he has to get on with when he starts?
I think actually a lot of what is to be done in the first 10 days has already started long ago, which to your point that you made earlier, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I think we are so far ahead of some of our other quote unquote peers in terms of clubs, people that still have an entire manager search to go on.
Yeah.
Chelsea. United.
United.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like,
Chelsea.
Like people that they have to do the whole process. And frankly, like the things that are needing to be done in the first 10 days were identified in meetings with Arne Slot before he was hired. You know, those are things that are talked about. Okay, when you come in, what is the things that we as the club are already going to be doing? What are the things that I mean, to me, these are things like identifying the highest priorities of need. Even more obscure things like identifying areas of need in the youth setup. Like, who can we kind of scout in that way? Who needs to be filling out the U18 and the U21 squads? Those are things that need to be done up front and foremost. And then like the transfer stuff, like we have backroom departments that have already been working on that. The data and analytics departments did not get a day off, between these announcements and now. Like they've been there. They've been working the
locked
whole time.
away in a room, just in the dark on the computers.
I mean, if you notice, there were some specific people who were notably absent from the Jurgen goodbye ceremonies, thusly being all of our new backroom staff or all of the the background staff. None of those people were there. And that's not because they were, there's no drama there. That's not because they didn't like it. Not because they wouldn't show up to him. It's because they're working. So that
You
stuff's
don't
already
like him.
They just hated him. No, I mean,
can't stand the man.
Could you imagine?
I know, yeah. It comes out in a book.
And every time someone like kind of insinuates that on Twitter, I just like the largest eye roll you could possibly imagine. I'm like, no, you got you idiots. Like this is the peak season for those people are pulling 20-hour days. Like there is stuff to be done. That stuff has already been. That process has already begun. I mean, there's obviously like the very basic stuff. Like he has to move his stuff into the office. Like, duh.
Find out what the alarm code is and where the lights are. Yeah. Where does he get a coffee from? Yeah,
get his dad.
It's true though, isn't it? He may be starting the job of all of our dreams, but he's still starting a new job, and
he's got to sit in HR meetings for.
Yeah, he's got to do the online thing, when you're doing your health and safety, and there's a fire drill and all that kind of stuff. He's got to get all those things done, hasn't he? And he has already been sighted at the training ground. He's already been to the stadium, of course. He's been sighted having a meal up in the Merseyside area, which is nice. So he's just getting a feel for the area, and I'm really excited. To be honest with you, I'm quite impressed with the way he conducts himself, the way that he talks, the way that he came under a little bit of what's the word? I suppose criticism for going and saying like, "Oh, I don't like how he's talking," because he's announcing himself as a Liverpool manager. It's like, I know we think we are the only team on the planet, but by the way, there is another club in this who are losing their manager, who are absolutely heartbroken, and that's Feyenoord, and they're all sitting there going, "Are you leaving?" And they have a right to know. They have a right, and ultimately, it's just. He's honest, and that's what you need to be. I think we love that from Klopp, as he was an honest person, and I think that if he can keep that way, I think he's going to do really, really well. Dan, thank you, Colin, for those bits there. Your thoughts on the priorities of Arne Slot coming into the club? What are your top 3 priorities that he really needs to be relying on? And everyone who's putting stuff in the chat, please carry on. I'll put the comments in where I can do. Thank you.
So I think all the contract stuff is going to be done by Hughes and Edwards. I don't think Slot's going to come in and be like get his hands in the situation. They may tell him it's like most likely he's going to show up June 1st, and Edwards or Hughes all start on the same day. They're going to say it's like this is where the situation's at. This is where we're at. This is what we think. This is what this is like our time frame to kind of figure everything out. When are they having the players report back? Is it like the end of June or something, like it's a week early?
Somebody created an Excel sheet. He's brought everyone who's not on international duty a week back early. So
yeah,
that's like Bashetic, Dan's, sort of the younger crowd, to be totally honest with you. So it's going to be like a youth club to begin with. And then after that one, there's a sort of staggered response because you're going to have senior players who are on international duty, and then it'll move to Olympics and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the way I think it's going to work, and I'm just basing this off of what we know of how things usually run at the club from like the Josh Williams book, Rafa Honigstein's book, is that they're gonna sit down and say like these are the players that we're going to try and sell and loan. These are all our youth players. Your Adam Lewis's, your Nat Phillips's. These are the players you don't have to worry about. These are the yellow. Let's say these are the red players. These are the players that we're going to take care of. You don't have to worry about them. If you want to have a look at them, you can look at them, but they're most likely going to be sold. Like the players that either need to be sold or they already have plans made for. Contracts are going to say like, we're going to handle the contracts. You don't need to worry about that. This is the situation as we know so far. This we're going to work towards. He's a manager or coach. He knows what to do situation. If they ask him, he's like, listen, this is what they do. I'm just here. I'm just the coach. I just showed up. It's my first day at work. It's my third day out here. I don't know. And that what they're going to essentially tell Slot or ask Slot to do is like, we have our Carvalhos, our Mortons, our Calvin Ramseys, our Owen Becks, our Luke like these are all the players we think are good enough to be in the first team. And they're going to essentially say like your goal, your mission, but they don't need to tell him this because he already knows, is that he's going to have to evaluate what's there. And he's essentially going to start building that evaluation process. So he's not going to evaluate on day one, but by the second week of July or by the first preseason game, maybe the second preseason game in August, he's probably going to know like, oh yeah, these are the players I want. These are the players that I think are good enough. These are players that are not good enough. And he's going to come in and make that decision and make that final decision for the team of what he wants to evolve. Now he probably has an idea of like, these are the players I think we need to buy, let's say a center back, again, William Pacheco, I always say his name, or, we need to buy a DM or a right winger or something else. And they'll say, we're way ahead of you. We have these dossiers and these players, take a look at it. I think someone mentioned like Aurelian Tchouameni, which I actually don't think is a bad shout. Listen, I know it's crazy, but I know Indy Kyla,
every 12 months.
I know exactly.
Tchouameni to Liverpool.
I know. Tell me about it. Paul is me a teacher. Yes, I am a teacher, Paul. The gaffer's first name, Arne Slot. It's Arne, I believe. It's Arne. Arne Slot is actually the full. Yeah,
I'm not Dutch. It's not going to come off quite as well. We call him Arne Slot all the time.
So what Arne Slot's going to do is he's going to familiarize himself with the place. He's going to start working on how he's going to evaluate these players moving forward. Again, the players that are in that yellow zone that have been loaned out or are promising, but he needs to figure out like what the next step is. And they probably already have plans in place, but it's saying, hey, we have these ideas, but if you have something else, come bring it in. And then there's going to be the stuff that he's going to be more hands-on on, which is like, obviously the setting up the team, the shape, the passing drills, yada, yada, all the stuff you do with a coach in the first team and filling out his backroom staff. They're getting a new set piece coach, yada, yada, yada. That's essentially what his focus is going to be on, is getting his feet under the desk, so to speak, and start essentially big picture. We get 82 points last year. How do we get 90 points next year? Which we're not that far away. And I think it's important to understand that even though we say it's a lot to do, there's a lot to do. There's actually not that much. This is a very talented team with a lot of players that isn't losing all that much. Like, yes, Joel Matip's leaving, but he didn't contribute that much. Thiago Alcantara, he didn't contribute that much last year. Considering
those 13 minutes. Come on, Dan. Don't underdo it. Come on. Stop now.
Jarrell Kwanzaa's broken through, and I think that has not been talked about enough. The fact that
No,
you have
it's
a
not.
20-year-old, 21-year-old center back, English, homegrown, that's breaking through. Joe Gomez has got his confidence back. Konate didn't have the best season, but still, like, he was able to contribute. Even though I think some people would want to sell him. I think Simicast is going to go, but
Yeah, I'm
Simicast is
almost
going to
certain.
go.
Yeah.
And they'll probably sell some other players too, but Slot's going to come in and say, like, okay, start playing out a season. This is who I'm going to evaluate. This is how I'm going to evaluate them. This is how we're going to play our season. Didn't they already announce the schedule too? Like they've already announced the games, like who we're playing in what order.
What for preseason?
No, for the regular season. Where does that drop?
Not sure yet. That's normally comes in July.
Yeah. So he's probably thinking, like, where since we're going to be in the Champions League, where are we going to be? Where are we going to be hitting our big
18th of June? 18th of June, sorry.
18th of June. So that is the situation going to be setting up. It's like,
away.
how are we going to plot out the rest of the season? And that's essentially what he's going to do, is just a lot of that kind of like micro administrative planning, figuring out, like, creating evaluations for the players, because he is new. This is he's a new coach to them. He's a new coach to the players. The players are new to him. So he needs to figure out, this is what they can do, this is what they can't do, and this is where I'm going to try and make them work and not work. And I do think there is something where, and I also think Paul mentioned Sepp Vandenberg. I think Sepp's one of those that might get sold and he doesn't have a look at for like 10 or 15 million if an offer comes in. And I think Slot knows that. And I think that he might be like, oh no, I want to evaluate him, but he might be out the door before Slot gets there, which we might think is unfortunate. But, if they're selling him for 15 million, it's probably because they're like, he's probably hit his max valuation. And, we either have better players coming up or we can get a better player on the market.
Well, I think it's a really good point, to be honest with you, that you've made there about the importance of sort of kind of is a timeline, a chronology of it as well. Is that the first people he gets to have a look at are those fringe players, are those young players who have either just made their way into the first team or are returning from loan situations to be able to come back into the first team sort of setup and to be able to have a look at them. And there will, I believe, will be certain players, it might well be, is that we've already lined up potentially a loan situation for them based on information from last year. I don't see a world where Ben Doak wouldn't go on something like a loan. I think after the injury that he had, it's perhaps a bit of too much of a step to be saying to him, you are going to be our backup to Mohamed Salah. Like that for me is too much of a stretch. The injury he had was really quite serious. And what Liverpool have done really well, unlike a lot of other clubs, is that when you go on a loan, this isn't just to kind of like just kind of string you along until something kind of comes along. Is normally, if you go on a loan, you're being sent to a club who normally plays a similar system of football to us to allow you to develop in the way that we want you to develop. And then when you do go away, if you do well, a la Harvey Elliott, you've done incredibly. Guess what? There's a first team place for you. Jarrell Kwanzaa has gone out there and played at Bristol Rovers a whole season, a whole league even further down. He's gone out there pretty much unknown, come back, and it wasn't a case of right, off you go again. He's been given the opportunity to put his skills to the test. And I mean, we've said about this before. How much would Jarrell Kwanzaa have cost us if we knew that's what we were getting? It would be a ridiculous sum of money, wouldn't it? So, I think there's going to be players who's going to be able to have a look at to decide, right, loan, keep, pre-season, maybe not.
I don't get this Jones hate. I feel like I
had to leave it up because I saw it before and I starred it, and I came under some flack there that I can't get every comment in because I have to say they need to kind of go in with what we're talking about. But I had to get this one up here because I just thought to myself that Curtis Jones, the only man who cannot stop taking strays at any possible time.
He was so outrageously good in the first half of the season, and
forget about it, Carl.
What have you done for me lately?
Yes.
Oh God, I know I've never seen a youth player like evolve the way Curtis Jones has. From a left winger, tap the side, don't need a left winger, to a center mid, who can do anything. and essentially became a Genie Wijnaldum replacement, and essentially only started playing bad after he got injured against Brentford in a contact injury where like the guy literally like went into his ankle. Like, you know, I don't get this Curtis Jones hate. Like, you know, we're not dealing with, you know, insert terrible midfielder we've had in the past. Like, I don't know, Joe Allen. I mean, Joe Allen's not terrible. That's being
crap.
like Victor Moses.
What's the Welsh Xavi we're talking about there? Come on, steady. It's a Welsh Xavi.
All right, lads, I've got to go.
Carl, appreciate it. Thanks, mate. Thanks for jumping on, buddy.
See you guys later. Great to see you.
See you, Colin.
Oh dear, let me just change these banners over so we're not into a double. Oh, that's not the right one. Just bear with us. I'm down here. Yeah, so I mean, this is always the interesting thing about, you know, certain players. They will always, you know, not, I suppose, please everybody, which is a shame. Really. I was a little bit too zoomed in on that one. See if I can find it. It's not going to work for me, is it? I'm not having a good time here. There we are. There we are. The technical difficulties. I don't have a production team behind us. It's just me. So bear with me and I appreciate it. Curtis Jones. I mean, again, this is another player, isn't it, who potentially might be going to the Euros. He might not be. He might be, you know, within Arne Slot's training camp kind of from the beginning, and he gets a good opportunity to see what he's all about, isn't he? So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one for him. What we'll do is just before we come up to the end is just to discuss very quickly. Leeds are not going to the Premier League next season, having lost the playoff final against Southampton. Southampton will be coming back up, probably for one season only, as usual. Oh, sorry, I'm not. I would have preferred Leeds to come up. To be totally honest with you, at least they fill the ground, which is important. So this is the question that comes from it, and the reason why I put Leeds duo linked is because there could be any one of 10 players potentially leaving Leeds in this summer, due to the fact that PSR, with its big teeth coming around, is coming to bite Leeds in the backside, as they have a very large hole in their finances that they're going to have to fill. And that's unfortunately going to mean that there's a number of players who potentially could be of interest to Liverpool, two of which I would say would be Somerville, a left winger. We will tap the sign. And we also have Archie Gray, son of Andy Gray. No, grandson of Andy Gray. He used to play for Leeds, who potentially is up there. He's one of another players who could be linked with as he plays right back and can also play as a CDM. Dan, of those two players, I'm sure you may have heard of, may have seen a few bits and pieces about them, but I don't expect you to be a true expert on them. If the prices were right, what price would be right for those players?
What was it that we bid for Lavia last year? Like
God knows. Which one was it? The first one, or was it the 35th one that we stuck in? And
so I think the last one that was reported was like 43.5 mil or whatever.
40 something daft, wasn't it? Yeah.
I think that anything between 30 to 40 is probably fine for Archie Gray. I'd probably say the same for Somerville, if you're being honest. I would buy Gray more than Somerville, more because I just think there are better players in Somerville. I don't get why people are hyping up a Dutch winger from like Leeds United in the championship. Like, listen, the championship's a good league. It's fun to watch. I think Somerville's fine. I think he's an Everton signing, the most Evertonian signing of all time. You know, someone that's like Alex Iwobi, you know, who was there a few years ago that scored that worldie against Arsenal. He's also a great Damari Gray. He's like Damari Gray. Honestly, he would be a lead sighting like 4 or 5 years ago. And people would be like, "Oh, he's a good player." He's like a Daka, a Patterson Daka. Remember Daka, where everyone thought like Liverpool should spend 40 mil on Patson Daka to score.
I remember the days when we were being called for all sorts, because we didn't sign Patson Daka
or Timo Werner. Yeah, and Timo Werner, like, you know, like the club was going.
We're not serious.
John Henry's bankrupt the club, like, you know, like no ambition, you know, no ambition to see it again. So Carter is the aficionado of all the English players, slightly overhyped but promising English players. And in his sporting director role. And I'm not trying to give him strays. I actually think he's right about Archie Gray. I think Archie Gray would be the one I would sign because he's young. He's 6'2". He's a DM. He can play fullback as well. He's done well for Leeds. I think he's one of the more promising players, and Leeds need to sell players. Now, I think they'll try and not sell Archie Gray. I think he's the one they'll really try and not sell because he is one of their younger players. He's got 44 games for them. So he's not a shrinking violet. He's not Lavia, who only played like 20 or 30 professional games for being signed. He does have a lot of games. But I do think that if you're spending 30 to 40 million on Archie Gray, people would expect him to start, and I don't think he would start. I think they would give him 6 months to a year to maybe a year and a half before he actually starts playing as a DM. But he's definitely one of the promising DMs in the market right now if you're trying to sign someone who's not, an Ogate, a Florentino Luis, someone who's been playing the position for a while, or the Japanese guy at Borussia Dortmund, and also Kone. And Marcus Thuram is not, Kefren Thuram is not a defensive mid, no matter what people say.
No, that always makes you laugh. Is that I sometimes feel like I'm being gaslighted when I'll be told that a certain player can play a certain position, and I go, but no, he can't though. And then I find myself furiously typing away on my phone, going, "He's never played there. Have I missed something? Is there a season missing where he played in this position? But apparently they can play in it." But yeah, I mean, what I would say is that those two players, it will be all about price, and it will all be about who's involved in the purchasing of those players. Because as much as we've already said before, we said at the start of the chat about January was very, very dry with clubs doing business because they're aware of PSR, they're aware of the fact that it now has full-on teeth, and then you're not just going to be able to go out there and kind of just go, well, we went over, so it doesn't matter. And then the UEFA rules, which are going to gradually get more difficult, not this season, but the season after, it's going to become even more stringent based on outcomings to money coming in. So it would just depend on how hot that market is. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would certainly not be against a player like Somerville if the price was starting with a 2 and it was a 20-something million pound signing. Absolutely no problem at all. Archie Gray, on the other hand, like you say, I think he would probably be the one that they would really, really want to keep, just because he is a Leeds lad, because he is one of their own, and that is important to them to be able to keep them. However, the 49ers, who are now the new owners of Leeds, have unfortunately inherited a little bit of a problem, a real financial issue that they have. Is there was a lot of overspending. Leeds spent a lot of money that they clearly couldn't afford, and they gambled with getting promotion, and it didn't pay off for them. And this is the situation they led into. I would not be against them. Paul's just put a comment saying, is Archie Gray a DM, and is he better than Bajcetic? He is a DM, but he also plays at right back, but he's playing more predominantly as a DM. So he's a little bit like, it's very similar profiles. Both of these players have actually played very similar positions. Bajcetic is beloved, isn't he? But next season, what I would say is that I think the club will be very, very cautious with the amount of football that he actually plays. He is only 19. It's no rush to get him out there and play him week in, week out. I think there'd be a likelihood if we see Bajcetic for 1,200 minutes next season, that's probably a reasonable amount of minutes. Probably going to put him in there as a substitute, probably going to put him there for kind of, we don't really have lower level European games anymore because of the new format that comes in there. Perhaps the League Cup, perhaps the FA Cup, there's minutes there that be available to him. But I just feel like they'd be really cautious with him. What FSG always being the cleverest in the room, what they should be doing now is they push so hard for everyone to run by the financial rules. The next thing they should be doing is pushing them to make sure that they must have 9 homegrown players, and we'll just get all the homegrown players in before we have to go and do that one. So a lot of people come out there and say here, like, for example, Paul's just put in there and he said Somerville's overhyped. We don't need another small right-footed winger. Strong words. Dan, your thoughts on that one before we wrap up? Is he overhyped? I mean, the numbers are good. I know they're the Championship, but I mean, ultimately, it's a goal or assist every other game. There would be some use in there somewhere. Surely, there's clearly a player somewhere hidden in there.
He's not. I it depends what you mean by overhyped. If you're saying that if you're buying Somerville, you're not challenging for the league, is my opinion. Like that's not a signing that you bring in and saying like you're going from third to first or second to first. Like what Somerville could do and who he should go to is someone like Newcastle or West Ham. Someone who needs like another attacking winger who can do bits and be like can give, let's say hypothetically 8 goals and 6 assists a season, for that team, and essentially is their second player. Exactly, yeah. It's someone in the top half. Who else is improved? I'm trying to think of all the other teams.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, when we sign Anthony Gordon, Newcastle could have him.
No,
yeah, there we are.
The sloth. We can't hide. We can't bring in ugly players now. If they're ugly, that's no go. Like this is
scandalous, Dan. I can't believe what I'm hearing. I'm shocked.
You can't buy Sid the Sloth and put him in Liverpool's team. That just diminishes our value. Like the beauty value of that team just goes down. Like we're talking about value here, Dan. Like you can buy the ugly players. I want all the handsome players. Like
hey, I've got.
I don't care about the football coach.
I've got Dominic Szoboszlai for the second half of the season, putting no numbers up there, but hitting the 4K camera shot 17 times in a 4-minute cameo, so we've got good looking players, but
I need people
putting numbers up. I need numbers. I need figures.
In all seriousness, though, I think Somerville makes more sense for a peripheral team that's trying to go from mid-table to Europe, or he'd actually be good at Villa. Villa would, Brighton. Villa, for me, Villa makes sense because Villa don't have a lot of depth, even though they're also in danger of PSR. They have a lot of good players, Villa, but that team was ran into the ground last year, and Somerville would alleviate that, especially when they didn't have Bailey and Diaby and Watkins in the same team. Yeah. He would because he's roughly around. Well, he's not as good as Diaby or Watkins, but the drop between say Bailey and Somerville is less than say, I know it sounds controversial, Diaz or Nunez to Somerville, that consistency, that effort, or even those like explosive moments, because regardless of what you think of Darwin Nunez, there's a reason he was so highly rated at Benfica, why Liverpool spent the money on him. And it wasn't because Klopp wanted a handsome Uruguayan in the team. There is a player there. Whether or not we ever see that player at Liverpool is another question and discussion in its own right. But there is a player there, and you can see it. The frustrating thing is when it doesn't happen. It's like, why? I can see the goal, the mission, I can see what you're trying to do. Why isn't it happening? This is frustrating. So I just think Somerville just doesn't make sense. Now, granted, we could buy him and he could be brilliant, and I could be wrong, and I would be very happy to be wrong about that. But I don't think I'm wrong, and I think Archie Gray would be the much more smarter buy, the homegrown English 18. You can buy him, you can develop him, he can start, he can not start, you can rotate him with Bajcetic. And essentially you could theoretically have a DM for the next 12 years, and then no one can ask where the DM is, and everyone's going to talk about who's the backup DM is.
Then what will people talk about if we actually buy a 6, Dan? That's what I want to know.
I don't know. Same old. Another left back, another striker, another when are we going to replace Mane? When are we going to replace
Gini Wijnaldum? We'll still be talking about 20 years time, won't we? When's the Wijnaldum signing coming in there?
We're becoming united. We're becoming united in the worst way. It's like we never replaced Roy Keane. Oh, we never replaced Roy Keane in the team.
I look forward to it. So welcome to the transfer room 10 years in the future, where you'll be joining us discussing those situations. To answer Paul's question, it's Allison. He's the best looking man the club's ever had. It's as simple as that one. What an incredibly good looking guy. Absolutely unbelievable. Right, everyone who's joined us, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much for those of you who got involved in the chat. I apologize if I wasn't able to put all of the comments up there. I just try and keep it flowing, keep everything going on there. And it's also difficult at times as you do talk between each other, which is brilliant. However, to get my attention or the attention of anyone on there, just put my name in and I'll know if you're talking to me or not. It's difficult to have a conversation with 18 different people at the same time. Right. If you have enjoyed the content, please put a like on. Those of you who are currently watching over on on Twitter, or X as it's called now, could you just come over very, very quickly to the YouTube and just click subscribe for me? It will come up, and I'll really, really, really appreciate it, because we're trying to keep growing. We're hit over 10,000. We just want to keep this growing, and more people who can get involved, the better the chat. We've got a big summer coming up there. We've got a new manager. There's going to be plenty of discussion. There's plenty to talk about. There's always going to be a stream on there every night for you to be able to get involved in there. Something for you to watch, something for you to listen to while you're working. And we're open to suggestions. So if there's anything you want to talk about, let us know. Send us a DM, send us a message, and we'll try and get that involved as much as we can. But until next time, Dan, thank you very much. Thank you from me. Thank you from the LC Transfer Room, and we'll see you very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.